People here say that they could see bodies literally dropping from the skies.
Huge passenger jet coming down in the middle of a war zone. That's going to be a big story.
It didn't seem like a real situation to be in at all.
I've just never seen so many dead people. It was unbelievable. I've been in Israel, would you believe, and I was waiting to go into Gaza. There's been another incident this afternoon. We were doing a live shot when suddenly this news broke.
Breaking news to bring you the Reuters news agency reporting that a Malaysian passenger aeroplane has crashed in Ukraine.
Our cameraman said to me, this MH17 has crashed, it's very unlucky. And I said, that's not unlucky, that's been shot down.
It was rumoured that the plane had been shot down by a surface-to-air missile. That kind of thing doesn't happen every day.
We'll try and find out more details from the scene.
I was working in the Sky newsroom that day. I think initially we all thought, well, this must be a mistake. It can't be a passenger jet. It's a military aircraft. For so many weeks, we'd had reports of Ukrainian aircraft being shot at by pro-Russian separatists in that exact region. But as the reports continued to come in, we realised that actually it was much bigger than that. So the newsroom becomes this kind of frenetic place. People are running around trying to make sure that we're getting this story on air correctly, reporting the facts.
Hundreds of passengers are feared dead after a Malaysian Airlines jet crashed in Ukraine.
There are claims the plane may have been shot down, with both the Ukrainian government and pro-Russian separatists denying responsibility.
Our foreign desk really springs into action. The key job that they have to do is make sure we've got people on the ground.
When we got the call to go to Ukraine.
Weirdly, Ukraine and Israel have so many flights, you couldn't imagine how many flights there are. Nobody else could get to Ukraine, but we did.
We jumped on the plane that evening. 7 hours later, we were at the crash site.
They were going to have to send a big deployment, multiple teams, multiple people to go and report this story. I kind of stuck my hand up and said, look, I can go.
Right away, you could see it was going to be a massive story. A huge passenger jet, a Boeing 777 coming down in the middle of a war zone. That's going to be a big story.
We navigated our own way and eventually saw some debris in a field.
I came over the hill and it was a cornfield. And at the bottom, I could see the wreckage burning. I said to Pete, this is still on fire. He said, it's unbelievable.
We didn't expect to get anywhere near the epicenter of the crash site. We were, I think, just mesmerized that we actually got there and then with what we were faced with. We were so fresh on the ground. Less than 24 hours after the plane had come down. All the bodies were still lying there. Compared to other stories I've done of natural disasters and war zones, this was high up there.
Everywhere I looked, there were bodies. I mean, just heads and arms and legs and young children and suitcases and just people. Everywhere, every step, in trees, tops of houses. It was staggering. And it's absolutely staggering. I've just never seen so many dead people in one place at just one time.
To be kind of launched into the middle of a crash site of a huge passenger plane, it just blew both of our minds.
This was such a catastrophic incident that as the plane broke up, people here say that they could see bodies literally dropping from the skies.
I was filming Stuart in the what was the wing section and where the engines are. You could smell bodies, you could smell death.
You saw parts of aircraft strewn around the countryside. And then, obviously, people's personal effects. And then you pull up actually to the main crash site itself, which is enormous. They're still pulling bodies out of the crash site.
And none of it seemed real. It didn't seem like a real situation to be in at all.
There we were, stood right on the middle of the main crash site. There were probably 20, 30 bodies stretching ahead of us. It was horrendous.
The debris field, I think is the term they used, was very large. We were at one end of the debris field, but it went back a long, long way. And the whole way through fields after fields and roads after roads, bodies, just everywhere you look.
The access to the crash zone was absolutely incredible. It wouldn't happen in the UK or anywhere else in the Western world. But there we were, right on the edge of this major crash site where a passenger jet had fallen from the sky.
There was no order whatsoever. There were military there, but there was no one actually preventing us from doing anything. It's just totally surreal.
Nothing was cordoned off. Everything could be accessed and seen, and genuinely you were standing in amongst this wreckage.
We walked through a bit of a track out into the field itself, and suddenly it opened up into an area where all the crops were flattened. There ahead of us basically was the front part of the aircraft. It was very obviously the cockpit and the business class section. You could see the pilot seats, you could see all the avionics, you could see cables and control panels just strewn everywhere. There was paperwork, there was flight logs and briefcases with the details of that day's flight on it. All these items that made the thing incredibly human.
It was so poignant and so sad. In the wreckage, you saw the actual handwritten note that the captain would have said over the tannoy.
It was like, what do we do? I had never seen anything like it. On the hands of the wheel of the, in the cockpit with the hands of the guy who had been flying the plane. And we did a piece of camera, and Pete says, we can't use it. I said, why? He says, that hand, it's still on the wheel.
I've never been in a situation like this before. You know, I've been in war zones many times, and I've been to smaller plane crashes, but I've never been to a large plane crash in the middle of a war zone.
Behind me I can hear, you won't be able to hear it, but there's a Grad missile launcher that has been firing pretty much every 10 minutes for the last few hours. There is a battle taking place a few kilometres away.
We were in the middle of a war. There was fighting going on all around us while we were looking at this huge gravesite. All you could hear was the boom of artillery.
I must confess, I really wasn't thinking about the danger aspects of it. I wasn't thinking about that being an active, pretty hairy war zone.
In the area of the crash, there were sunflower fields and cornfields, and locals had effectively put a white flag on a stick marking a body or part of a body.
I remember seeing that local people had come from nearby towns and villages. There was a group of coal miners who'd come to help with the recovery effort.
We pulled up at a field where we saw a lot of activity, and basically it was people doing a long line search through the crops. And it was quite extraordinary. It was a beautiful picture, if you like, because the crops are so pretty in the sunlight. But you know that they're actually looking for bodies. And every time they found a body, they'd put a stick in the ground with a little white piece of material on it, and that would mark a body. That will stay with me.
It took a really long time for the repatriation to get underway. First, they had to account for all of the victims and then transport them from the crash site to Ukrainian-friendly territory, and that was where they were going to be flown on their final journey home.
This was the first time that the bodies were actually dealt with any sort of dignity. They were handed over, and then everything kind of slowed down, and the bodies were calmly loaded onto the back of the transport planes. It was almost like a military funeral, very, very respectful.
When a plane full of women, men, children, who are probably just going on holiday, get shot out of the sky by a missile, that should not have happened. I think that was really difficult to process, and I really hope I don't ever have to cover a story like that again.
Why they would want to shoot a passenger jet down, I do not know. The only thing I can think is that it was unintentional. Military jets and helicopters have been shot down, but why they would suddenly then want to start targeting a passenger jet, I just don't understand.
There was a major investigation, and that found that the missile system used to shoot down the airliner had come from Russia. But of course the Russians deny that, and the whole thing just goes on and on.
It was only when you started to think about the families and everything that they'd gone through. It's quite distressing.
My sympathy would go to obviously the families who have not got closure yet. I just hope that comes soon.